Right. Thanks, Brandy. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, August 5th, 2021 Watertown City Plan Commission meeting. Randy, can I get a roll call?
Yes. Dolly.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
Kays.
Here.
Aletsky.
Present.
Dargis Johnson.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
And then Brink, Hanson, and Spire are absent. We have a quorum.
Alrighty. Thank you, Brandy. Moving on to item 3 on the agenda today is the invitation for public comment participant submittal. So I believe we have a sign up there in the room. If anybody'd like to speak on an agenda item or on an item that is not on the agenda today, we'll have some time for that after the regular scheduled agenda. Moving on to item 4 is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion for the approval?
So moved, Case.
Second,
A motion by
Dargis.
Mr. Kays and a second by, was that Dargis Johnson? Any additional discussion on that agenda before we take a vote? Okay, we'll take a vote on the approval of the agenda.
Roll call. Or do we want?
Yes, please.
Okay. Dolly.
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
That motion's approved. Moving forward with the agenda then, item 5 is the approval of the minutes from the July 22nd, 2021 meeting. So everybody had a chance to review those minutes? If we have, I'll look for a motion for approval.
Ford moves.
Second, Culhane.
A motion and a second. Any additional discussion on those meetings? Okay, we'll take a vote on that as well.
Dolly.
Yes?
Ford.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Aletsky.
Yes.
Dargis Johnson.
Yes.
Culhane.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 6 for the regular agenda. Item 6A is resolution 2021-36, vacation request. Brandy?
Yes, thank you, Blake. So what we're looking at today is the vacation request for a portion of Skyline Drive, and that is between 4th Avenue Northwest and 3rd Avenue Northwest. And to give you a little better proximity for this area, it is a portion that is unimproved as 4th Avenue does dead end in this location. And then the Millette House is up here to the north, and then there's 5th Avenue that loops into Skyline Drive, and then Lions Park here. So this portion, Robert Korth is the applicant, and then he owns 3 of the adjacent properties along with Muth Electric. And so they have all signed the petition to vacate this portion of right-of-way. It does have utilities within it, so a utility easement will be retained over the entirety of it, but it is not in the street system, the major street system to connect this portion of Skyline Drive. So as far as it ever being improved, staff feels comfortable with it being vacated. The oddity for what was requested is shown here on the map, and I'll pull up the petition so you can see what was presented here. So the I wanted to that's not what I wanted it to do. I want to flip it north, so I guess we'll have to go that way. So what was proposed is that the 2 property corners within the right-of-way of 4th Avenue, which is an 80-foot right-of-way, the applicant wanted to run the vacation perpendicular to this property corner. Obviously, you can see it is diagonal, and then that it would run taking up a portion of the right-of-way of 4th Avenue Northwest. And so when staff reviewed this, it's staff's recommendation that we would look at potentially a vacation to 4th Avenue that would run parallel, but this would doing it this way, so there would be approximately 48 feet here that would go to the adjacent landowner, which typically we go in half, and the right-of-way is the 80 feet. So that would leave 31.2 feet here. However, the street department does need access down to this area. There's a drainage swale, and then also just for maintenance for snow removal and garbage pickup, things of that nature, because it is a dead end. And so it is, you can do a turning motion in that area right now. So that was expressed to the applicant. He just wanted to move forward with presenting it this way, and then you guys, and he's here, so you guys can, after when the public hearing is open, then you can ask questions there. But staff is recommending that we would end the vacation at the right-of-way of 4th Avenue to the south here. That would run parallel to the lot lines. Let me see if there's anything else, and then we can, I think that with that, and just mainly the point is that a utility easement will be retained over the entirety. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Hey, Brandy, who owns that? What about that property that goes north of 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue? Is that vacated also?
No, that's still right-of-way.
That's still Skyline,
Yep,
but it's not improved either, right?
no.
I didn't think so.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Case.
I'll ask a question of staff. So, a couple years ago, when we were dealing with public right-of-way vacations, I think the one with the church up there on 2nd Street, or 3rd, whatever street that is, staff put together some sort of a checklist to see whether or not a street should be vacated. And I'm assuming that you applied those standards, and this vacation met all of those standards that were identified in that
Yes.
checklist.
And that is, that's what the facts are here, the 4 criteria that we look at. And so the reason here of why staff is recommending not going forward with how the vacation was proposed, but ending it at the right-of-way of 4th Avenue is because access is restricted by this vacation as proposed. And that's one of the criteria, is that access is not restricted.
Thank you. I just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Mrs.
Ms. Ford.
Brandy, could you just show us specifically which are the 3 properties that Mr. Korth owns?
So it is, if you can see my screen here, it's
I
the
can.
3 that are blue now.
All right, those 3.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
so with the easement would there be any ability to construct on top of that, on top of this property whatsoever?
No. Nope.
And this is just more or less to, the reason, and I can ask the applicant, I guess.
And Brandy, just to clarify, access is restricted based on that small section that encroaches within the 4th Avenue existing right-of-way. So if that ended at the southern section of 4th Avenue as proposed, then it would not restrict, and therefore it would be recommended to move forward.
Yep. It's stated that way in the action, or in the motion for recommendation. And so then access would not be restricted to the property, the city property to the west, and which is, gosh, it's gonna leave me now. It's a dedicated park, starts with W. I'm not gonna think of it. Yeah.
Whitwam,
Yes, thank you, Diana.
you're welcome.
Whitwam.
So may I ask another question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It says it'll be conveyed evenly to each adjacent landowner. What exactly does that mean, evenly and adjacent landowner? I mean, what's happening here with that?
So that goes, the right-of-way is split in half, so it's a 33-foot right-of-way, so then half will go to the adjacent property owners on the east and half on the west. And that's how every vacation is for the most part, as long it goes to the parent parcel. And if it's, and so that is typically half and half where the right-of-way was established.
In this case, the applicant is on both sides for the majority of this, but there would be a small section that Muth is adjacent to where they would receive that 33 feet.
Yep, and it would be like the half of that.
Right.
This is Ford again. I wonder if Brandy or Stacy could just explain briefly why no money is changing hands when we perhaps transfer property like this to a private party.
It does go back to the parcel, so then it does go back on the tax roll, and so it does have a value, then an assessed value that could be added to the property, or would be added to the property, but it also would be on the tax roll again.
That's not quite what I mean. I understand that, but mostly when a person adds property to an adjacent property, you would pay for it. So why, what law or what reference do we have, what ordinance that allows this to happen? I just wanted you to flesh that out a little bit. Without purchase of this land, it's being transferred to them. I understand that's how it's going to happen. Just what's the background behind doing it in that manner?
Matt, I think the mechanism is laid out in state law.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah,
if I
Matt will
might,
answer that.
there's a specific statute that allows for vacation of right-of-way. And the theory is, it goes back to the parent parcels because originally it was taken from those parcels as a requirement of platting back when it was originally laid out. And so in some sense, it's actually being given back to the owners, who, giving it back essentially to who gave it to us in the first place.
I think just to add on to what Matt is saying is when a piece of property is dedicated as public right-of-way, there is some sort of intention that a public right-of-way or a street will be constructed in that right-of-way or a walking path or something. And being that that has not happened, I think there's some other very buried statutes that says that public right-of-ways that haven't been utilized in excess of 20 years theoretically lose some of their public right-of-way status. And I think I remember Stanton Fox explaining that to the Planning Commission at one point in time years ago.
Yeah, and with this this is Stacy, if I could, Mr. Chair. With this Skyline Drive not being shown as a connection in our major street plan, I think that along with the fact that it has been unimproved for many years, I think that shows meets part of the criteria for moving forward, except keeping all of 4th Street there for access purposes for turnaround for city services.
Thank you for all those explanations. I think it's very helpful that the public can hear those explanations. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brandy, could you do me
At
a
this
favor?
point, I'd like
Sorry.
to open the public hearing as well, if there's anybody here to speak on behalf or against.
Brandy, could you just move the map down, showing more of the north? Okay, thanks.
Did you want to speak at all, Robert? You have to come up here, though. You have to come up here.
I think what's in question.
You have to come to, and then state your name,
Thanks.
and you can sit.
I'm Robert Korth. I'm the owner of the old Longworth Edition property, is what they called it. Dave and his wife's, don't remember her name, they used to own that. And I believe what's in question here, the main concern is the vacation of Skyline onto 4th Avenue. The reason that I would like to place why I would prefer that is because if you look at the alley from 5th Avenue around the Millette House, all that water, trash, garbage, whatever it is, comes down the alley, comes into 4th, and it doesn't get over to the culvert, to that drainage. If I would have the more room to help alleviate that and make some kind of a swell there to get it over, it would help me immensely Because right now, it all runs on top of my property, and then it comes around on my property into the shed, and I can't get it over to where it belongs. It comes running in front of the shed, and there's all kinds of garbage, and it's not only the water from Fifth Avenue, it's also from all those houses, all the roofs, the garage, concrete, all that.
And I did hear this concern from Robert, so I did, and Rob Bainan, street superintendent, was aware of it too, and that they are willing to help alleviate that issue. And I think that they had created a berm last year, came out there.
Yes.
So I think they are willing to have a continued effort to try to help that. But having only that portion of Fourth is, probably not going to help it.
I understand. However, Fourth Avenue is an 80-foot wide street. Why doesn't the city reclaim their right-of-way and maintain it instead of, if you see the neighbors on both sides, they have already encroached 25 feet. That blacktop is 33 feet wide, and they have their retaining walls on both sides right up to that asphalt. I mean, they get 25 feet already on both sides. I'm asking to make my property line square instead of having a jog in it.
And that was another point that we had discussed, where we could look at, because Fourth Avenue, especially, it's a dead-end section down here, so we could look at vacating the 80-foot right-of-way to the typical 66-foot for a local street, and then that would give additional space for what Robert's saying of the property owners using it up to the curb or having the retaining walls, as you can kind of see in this picture. That is still going to encroach, which is something that we could look into
Yes, if you go
enforcing.
and shrink that down to 66 feet, that serves no purpose. All you're doing is giving the adjacent landowners 7 feet on both sides. Yeah, and it does nothing for the encroachment against the right-of-way. Now they have 18 feet. You know, they're still on city property with whatever they're doing there, with their berms or walls. Or if this can't work, I have another suggestion maybe you'd listen to. As it is now, leave Fourth Avenue the way it is. Judge Means lives on one side, Dave and Linda Morris are on the other side. I think it would be foolish to take David's wall out and his house would fail, and Carmen Means just put in a really nice flower garden there. To me, I'm not asking to remove that. I think it looks great. I think that Fourth Avenue should be left at 33 feet, but let's all be able to, if they get 25 feet, I also want the city to grant me to be able to use the right-of-way 25 feet also. And that would be on both sides.
And the thing about those, the retaining walls and whatnot, so they were most likely put in as landscaping, and then they were thinking that they didn't have to get a permit, but they not knowing they were within the right of way. So now that we know that, we can send notice, or we can look at, reducing that right of way to 60, but 66 feet is pretty typical, but it is also a dead end road. So we could look at talking with the engineers to see if that would be something that they would be interested in.
Yeah.
Randy, if we reduce the right of way on Fourth Avenue, does that not suffer from the same access restriction issue?
No, because as long as we retain the pavement, because then they're still able to utilize this right of way to get to this property. So, the fact that it is a dead end section could be a unique situation that we could look into, but that would also be a separate action. It would be a separate petition.
Right.
And so we wouldn't act on that today. It's something we could look into if the board thought that was favorable.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Gage?
so if we went with staff's recommendation, granting the vacation up to the south boundary of Fourth Avenue, and then the all of the owners along Fourth Avenue, as well as Mr. Corthwood, to come back with a subsequent suggestion to reduce the right-of-way along Fourth Avenue, and then allowing a trade-off one way or the other. That would be, we'd take that up as a separate action down the road. We couldn't act on anything that Mr. Korth is, we can't be, trading horses at this point.
Yeah.
I understand all that, and I assume that that's how this is going to go. But I don't know if you realize that I'm also saying from my west property line, I would also want to come that way 25 feet also. Up into Fourth
I
Avenue.
don't think that, I'll be honest with you, I don't
I
think
think that's
that's.
the primary concern from an access restriction, though, is then that removes the
Yes,
ability to
it would.
maintain that northerly access.
Okay, so then what are we going to do? The neighbors get 25 feet and I don't?
So there's
don't-
actually a formal process. If I could, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Stacy. So there's actually a formal process for that, and I don't know the history of how those structures and things went in, but there's a formal process if somebody wants to place something in the right of way. Basically it's a request, and the council does approve an encroachment agreement within the right of way. So that's a separate process. And we do rely on our reviewers in terms of for streets and for solid waste and things like that for turnarounds, and also potentially even fire and emergency services. So
Okay, so that'll all be done at a separate time. is what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah, it would be a separate formal process if somebody wants to install something within the city right of way, and that is a decision
Well-
by the city council.
I understand. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention that that's probably the way that I would like to proceed down the road. Maybe it would help them know what I'm doing in the future, because I'm trying to alleviate the water there. I think that Fourth Avenue should have 2 storm drains, one on each side, and get it over to the culvert, to all the water and everything that comes down there. However, Skyline has got 2 gas line pipes, a 4-inch, a 6-inch. They're going to be putting in a 30-inch water pipe main up to the hospital. And I believe there's another water pipe in there. It's going to be pretty difficult then to get storm drains in there, to get from there, point A to point B.
Well-
So,
There is storm sewer, and I believe that these
Oh,
are
that is?
denoted as drains. Or some sort of inlet. But that's something that we can continue to work with you on in the street
Okay.
department. And with it being in the right of way, the water should not be your responsibility, as it's a accumulation of homes. So because you're at the bottom of the hill, we'll continue to work with you on getting that resolved.
I understand. Skyline still is 80, or Fourth Avenue still is 80 feet. There would be plenty of room there. What does that give them? 33 more feet? 48 to 80, 32 feet? On the north side of the proposed, what I proposed. They'd move a tree and they'd have 33 feet to turn around on that park, whatever you called it, and Skyline. If they would grant me my property straight.
I think, Mr. Chair, I think this is a great discussion, but I think it needs to be had with staff. I think we need to be dealing with the request that's before us. And I would make, if you would close the public hearing, I'd make a motion to approve, to move forward.
Is there anybody else in the room there to speak in behalf of the public hearing before I close the?
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, this is Bert Maggs with Utilities. Mr. Korth is right. There's a lot of stuff in there. We have no problem with the vacation of Skyline Drive. Just want to emphasize the utility easement stays, and he is correct. It's going to be a 20-inch, but it's still large water main that's going to go in either in 2022 or 2023. It's not only going to go in the part that's vacated, all the way up Skyline up to 6th Avenue, and then over to the Millette Water Towers where we need to run that. So we're okay with the vacation. Just want to emphasize the utility easements all stay. Plus, we're going to continue to use it for a utility corridor.
Thanks, Bert.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Brandy. Has the park department been advised of that would be a way to connect bike trail to Third, running it all the way up to the sidewalk that runs along 10th?
We did not discuss that.
It would be great access, since that is city lands there with that park, in order to get down to the Lions Park along Third, to have a bike trail there. Maybe it's just been the best kept secret for a while, because, nobody probably thought that land was ours to use, but before we just discard that land as useless, I mean, it would make a great trail, so.
Right, I'm going to turn on the proposed pedestrian trail from our master plan. Let's see where they show that. Okay. Proposed is over, so yeah, it's not showing it anyway, but existing, then I think, is it just because we run it along?
On the west side of the river there.
Yeah. Yeah, so then you have the connection there on 10th where, and then where were you talking about it? Were you talking it connecting here too?
Well, it could, because there's that sidewalk that runs down the south side of 10th, so right where your cursor is there, you could run it along Skyline, the edge of Skyline, where everybody,
Except that would not be a nice bike route. St. Anne's Hill.
Well, if you're in shape, it is. Come on,
Come
girl.
on, Brandy, you've gone up and down that hill a few times.
On my foot.
Yeah.
Bike, I would be walking
No,
that
they
up.
go.
I think the bigger problem, more immediate concern from a pedestrian standpoint along Third Avenue is the lack of sidewalk all the way along Third Avenue from the residential to the east of these properties to the residential on the west side of Bramble Park there.
Aren't they putting in sidewalks right now?
Yeah, that's what I
They,
thought.
they are in the residential area. I did plan I have an open question on that I'll bring up in the new business section. At this point, though, I'll close the public hearing. And
Mr.
look
Chair,
for
I'd
a
like
motion
to
on the
make a
resolution you
motion.
have.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the vacation subject to the staff recommendation that the vacation stops at the south boundary of 4th Avenue Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Kays. Got a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second, Culhane. I'd like to ask a question of staff before we vote on it, though.
Yes, Mr. Clehan.
Matt, do we need to include in our motion the utility easement, utility corridor language, or is that?
Excuse me, yeah, that would be part of my motion.
And I believe it is already represented in the resolution as proposed, 2021-36, that it would not include the north 48.8 feet as shown on the petition exhibit A, and that the utility easement be retained over the entirety of the above described property.
That's what I meant.
So, this is Stacy, Mr. Chair, if I could just interject quickly. If the city was to look at that as a pedestrian pathway, bike path, or corridor, the board could look at adding on not the utility easement, but an access and utility easement be retained. So just an idea for consideration.
I'm comfortable with retaining the utility easement. I do remember being very intimately involved with the development of the master transportation and plan and the sidewalk and the trail plan. And I think that we looked at the west side of the river as being the major artery for the trails, and I'm not sure it's really necessary at this point in time.
I agree, and I think part of that conversation really was around, we have an extensive amount of park land that's specifically for this type of conveyance, and we'd like to channel that traffic that direction.
I would emphasize, and Blake, you were dead on when you said that we need to do something about Third Avenue Northwest, though.
Absolutely.
I drive that every single day, twice, 2 to 4 times a day, and there's young children all day, every day, coming and going between Lions Park and the residential neighborhood to the east on the road.
Okay, so we have the motion in a
So,
second.
to your point, Liam, that's why it would get you up into that neighborhood through
Yeah, and
there.
I appreciate that, Rhonda. And I'm all for bike trails, love bikes, bike trails, biking, etc. But I don't know. It seems like that one, it kind of goes to nowhere in that instance. I understand the emphasis. I think if we focus and make sure that we do it right on Third Avenue, that should alleviate that.
Yes, and I would say too, because we have where we have our trail system, and then we have the proposed trail system where it's not. I mean, when we did the master plan, that wasn't considered, and it's also, you know, pedestrian connectivity it's lacking at Third. Otherwise, there's going to be sidewalks where pedestrians will have that. We keep the bike trails on the trail that's there today, and then we focus. Expanding our trail network in the proposed areas on our master plan.
And then there is existing sidewalks, if you go just a block to the east of this, into Third Avenue and Third Street.
Yeah.
And there is a connection that extends partially to the west there, but it stops basically at the alleyway there. So just
Yeah.
west of 305 3rd Street Northwest. Really, I think the primary concern from a pedestrian standpoint is connecting that easterly and westerly pedestrian area. So a sidewalk corridor along 3rd Avenue
Yeah.
would tie you into the existing bike trail, would tie you into the neighborhoods to the east as well as the neighborhoods to the west.
Yes. And if that, Justin and Heath are not here, but isn't 3rd Avenue's being reconstructed in
Yes, it is.
They're digging it up right now. Sorry. It looks like they're doing the overlay right now, doesn't it?
West of Compesca Boulevard.
Yeah.
I don't know about the. I know the bridge was slated to. At least my understanding was the bridge was slated to be redone eventually, right? Next year.
Yeah, and so I think that might be in conjunction. So,
Yeah, I'm not sure about that from, from a capital project standpoint, but we could certainly look into that and update the board.
Mr. Chair, this is Ford.
Yes, Ms. Ford?
2 quick things. First, I have a notice on my screen that says guests are waiting to join View Lobby. I don't know
Yeah,
who
I-
needs that.
I admitted them.
Okay, and then the audio right now isn't particularly clear, and I just wanted to make sure that Todd's motion did say not to include the north 48.8 feet. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Call the question.
All right. We will go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Okay, Colhane? Yes. Dargis Johnson?
Yes.
Valetsky?
Yes.
Kays?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Dolly?
Yes. The motion passes. Moving on to item 6B on the regular agenda, which is an annexation and zoning. It'll be resolutions 2021-34 and 35.
All right, thank you, Blake. So this, as Blake stated, is an annexation and zoning request for 34.98 acres on the west side of town, just south of Derby Downs. So the area, where am I at here? Went too far. So if I pull up the vicinity map on the agenda, you'll see that it is abutting Golf Course Road and 3rd Avenue, and then it comes down to where the existing church property is, and approximately to this area. And that is on my vicinity map here, where you can see the streets outline. So this will be annexed and zoned as A1 agricultural district, and the ag district, following the county's guidelines, requires 35 acres, so of course we're at 34.98, but it doesn't matter because it is adjacent to, it's a budding agricultural zoning designation, so it does meet the density requirement. And then as far as minimum lot size would go, this property, before it would be developed anyway, would require concept planning and then rezoning and replatting or platting, because it would not be conforming to develop. So that would be coming, but this is just the first step of bringing this property into city limits. So with that, and it'll be 2 action items for the annexation and zoning. And so, but we're just gonna have the one all presenting it once. We only have to open the public hearing for the zoning, or for the, we'll just open the public hearing for both at the same time, have it at once, separate action items. So with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Why are we bringing it in as Ag 1?
It's really because the existing use is a field, and
Sure, but that's not when it's gonna be done. I mean, it's not gonna stay a field, is it?
no, if, once they develop it, but then before they would develop it, actually is a better placeholder district, because we don't know, we don't have a concept plan for the area. So that would have to be approved by Plan Commission before any development could occur.
I have so many ordinances in my head, but doesn't Watertown require the property be brought in as ag as a holding piece? I mean, I agree. I think that's what you should do. If you have no intention to develop it, but you want to be in the city, it should be brought in as ag, as a holding district, until we see that it comports with the land use plan and what their zoning ordinances, zoning is going to be.
Yes, and a lot of people do that too, just so with, I mean, they do need to go through the subdivision process, but first they would need to bring it into city limits and know that that is good before moving forward. So it's a good placeholder district. And then before anything would change, it would come back to the board and the city council, public notice would be out. So,
Do they plan to just keep going west as the developments get filled up, just keep growing?
well, and once they get a concept plan for the area, then they maybe would be able to come in as a different district once they have a master plan and know what can be approved.
Is there a concept of what type of use this applicant is looking at for the property?
It would have to be something residential, but when we annex and zone, that's not required.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, I mean, my feelings and druthers are, somebody wants to have their property in the city of Watertown. They want to start paying taxes in the city of Watertown. We don't know what we want to do with it. What is it of our concern? It's just basically come on in. When you get ready to develop, we'll talk about it then.
And it's contiguous on 3 sides.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be contiguous to the boundary to be annexed. So, yeah.
The only question, this doesn't have any implication on like park dedication or anything like that if it's brought in but via ag and then transferred to something?
No, that's the park dedication is at the time of annexation or master planning. So there's a twofold of when to catch the park dedication, because somebody could bring anytime there's a rezone and well, that's a bad example. So once they would bring it in, if they came in like these guys as A1, then when they get their master plan completed, then that's when we would pick apart what's residential, how we dealt with Harmony Hill. So when we're doing it in phasing, because it's tough, but you can catch it at either point. So we got
at least 2 bites
options.
at the apple.
Yeah.
And then as far as utilities, we have water and sewer capabilities to handle that? Or?
And we would look at that at the time that they would be looking at developing.
Again, it gets back to somebody just wants to be in the city. Whether we have the ability to serve them with water and sewer, it doesn't really matter at this point in time.
There is sewer and water out there, so presumably yes.
All right, at this time, I'll open the public hearing if anybody's here to speak on behalf or against. This will be the public hearing for both the annexation and the zoning.
I'm Bill Riefenberger, one of the partners with my kids on the development. That this obviously would be brought back as the plotting and working on all that right now. Matter of fact, we've done a lot of work on that already. But the reason for the 35 acres is pretty much has to do with the rural water, because that has to be brought in, and if we take it into smaller parcels, we got to pay the same fee. So this is pretty much what dictated the size of the first annexation, was based on the fee that has to be paid to rural water.
Mr. Riefenberger, do you own or have options on the other property around the 35
We
acres?
own everything around the church, that quarter minus the church. And just in case it comes up, I don't want to get into other minutia, but we visited with the church people, and they're all on board with this. They're all excited about the whole thing. So that was one of my first questions: would there be any restrictions there? And that's not an issue at all. Of course, they'll speak for that when we come back with the other things. But we've visited with all of them about that. So,
Mr. Riefenberger, do you have a timetable on when you expect to come in with a concept plan then?
as fast as we can. We want to get going on things this year yet if we can. So there's already been, Austin has already been working on the plot and stuff, and so we should see that shortly. But this is the first process before we can get anything going, quite honestly. We were planning on being further ahead, but we had to actually get the land purchase and do the annexation before we can get anything else going for the development portion, so. Any other questions for me? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riefenberger.
Yes, and good point on the sewer water. They're within that territory, so.
Is there anybody else to speak on behalf or against in the public hearing while it's open? Anybody in the room there?
Just one quick question, maybe for utilities. Would there ever be issues with the water delivery out there, Bert?
We don't anticipate any issues. That is a different, two different zones. That's kind of splits our lake and our low zone. We'll just have to figure it out. Depends how it gets developed. But we should be able to have plenty out there to serve them, electric, gas, as well.
Good deal. Thank you.
One more time for the public hearing. Anybody in the room or on Teams? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We have two resolutions in front of us, one for the annexation, one for the zoning. I think it would be appropriate to look at the annexation first.
Motion to approve resolution number 2021-34.
Motion by Mr. Kays for the annexation.
Second by Oletzky.
Second by Ford. Any additional discussion on the annexation? All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
All right, Kays,
Yes.
Oletzky,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Dolly.
Yes. That motion passes. Moving on to the zoning.
I'd move
Do I
to
have a
approve.
motion to approve the zoning?
I'd move to approve resolution number 2021-35.
Motion by Culhane,
Second by Oletzky.
second by Oletzky. Any additional discussion before we vote on the zoning? All right, we'll do a roll call vote.
All right, Ford,
Yes.
Dolly,
Yes?
Culhane,
Yes.
Dargits Johnson,
Yes.
Oletzky,
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Motion passes as well. Thank you. Moving on to item 7 on the agenda is the open public comments. Was there anybody that signed up to speak in the public forum on an item that wasn't on the agenda tonight?
No, nope.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. Item 8A, it looks like on the agenda for the medical cannabis ordinance update.
Yes, and so at this point, Stacy is going to take over and give the update on where the medical cannabis ordinance is at. And then also I am going to have to exit, so she will close the meeting as well. And I'll leave you guys with that. I might stay for a little portion, but I do have another engagement that I'll have to leave for here.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Brandy. We did talk about this briefly, I think, at one of our last meetings. Attorney Roby is handing out the most recent version of the draft. Again, it is in draft form. We did have our final committee meeting yesterday, so it's hot off the press, but there's still potentially a few things to be looking into, and based on some of your feedback as well. The time frame on this is rather tight. We would like to have something in place by the 1st of October is our guideline. So. And then also, we will have a city-county meeting as well at the Plan Commission level, and then at the City Council, County Commission level for the joint area. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to City Attorney Roby for an introduction.
Before I just go give a general overview, I just want to email this out to who's online. So we have Blake and who else? We have Diana.
Board.
And then was there? I see there's a number on there.
Oh, sorry, Matt.
Yeah, I don't recognize the phone number.
Is that a media member? Yeah, 880. Can you read? 880-5059. Can you please identify yourself?
Matt, that's me, Jason Hanson.
Oh.
Oh, hi, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, Jason.
So I'm going to email those that are on Teams here. I'm going to send an email right now, so you'll have the most recent draft.
And if you throw it in a drive too, like just right in the end drive, then I can pull it up on the big screen too.
Actually, I'm just going to send it to you. We email it.
Yeah.
Okay. I can't find Jason's email.
Well, or just put it in the end drive.
Send it to you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. We were
Some housekeeping items there.
so what's in front of you here is 15 pages, and I guess I want to reiterate what is it here an echo somewhere? Reiterate what Stacy had said, that this is a draft. There are probably some typos in here. There are probably some references that now need to be updated based on a few things that have changed. So I just want to emphasize that to those looking at this, that it is in draft form still, but we hope to have it buttoned up as best we can by the time we have the first reading with the council and then the subsequent action by the Plan Commission. So just generally, South Dakota state law initiated by IM26 went into effect on July 1st. Within that law, it gave the state of South Dakota until the end of October to come up with administrative rules related to the law. That law, again, is just pertaining to medical cannabis. The city, if you'll recall, took action, I guess in June, on a temporary ordinance that essentially said that we're not going to entertain any applications for licenses or consider any zoning related issues for establishments until the state puts their rules into effect. At this time, we expect the state's rules will likely be in effect by October 4th, so our timeline accommodates for that our law will be in effect by the time the state's rules go into effect. So generally, the state law encompasses a broad array of issues, but it leaves to municipalities more or less the ability to regulate time, place, and manner, and the number of the 4 different types of medical cannabis establishments. And those types are dispensaries, cultivation facilities, testing facilities, and manufacturing facilities. I'll lump together the first 3: cultivation, testing, and manufacturing. This draft indicates that those 3 types of facilities will be limited to the I zone, so I1 and I2, and there is no cap on the number of those facilities in this proposal in the city of Watertown. Dispensaries, and this proposal indicates that they would be allowed in the C1, C2, and C3 zones. And at this time, the proposal is for a maximum of 3 dispensaries in the city. And that would, the way we came up with that is 1 per 10,000 people or fraction thereof. And so I believe our population is 22,148 at the last census, and presumably it'll be a bit higher than that. So it would be a number of 3 dispensaries at this time. Now the way this process is, we expect the process to work. The state's going to issue a license as well. The city's going to issue a license. The state's going to issue a license. We expect it to play out essentially in the following manner, where somebody will be interested in operating one of these facilities. They'll come into the city. They'll identify the location they'd like to operate. We'll identify whether or not that location is satisfactory, and we'll also review their site plan and their building plans. And essentially, the state's rule is that they're not going to issue their license until they're satisfied, and so they receive assurance from us that the facility meets all the local requirements. So by the time they get to the state, they'll have proven to us that they'll meet all the local requirements. Then the state will consider a plethora of other issues. They're the ones that will be, checking on character and fitness, and doing a background check and that sort of thing, reviewing business plans, and then assuming all that checks out, then issuing the permit. One other piece to this that would be helpful, and what I see Stacy has pulled up here, is there is some limitations, some setbacks from certain types of establishments, and the map kind of indicates essentially the result of those setbacks. And maybe I'll let Stacy chime in on kind of the specifics of each one of those colors and the types of establishments we chose to have certain setbacks from.
Sure. Thank you, Attorney Roby. So this map has a lot of different colors, and what I'd like to draw everyone's attention to is this blue here that is transparent, that you can see through, because this is actually the area that would be left for, that would be allowable for dispensaries. And then these areas here, they're the I-1 and the I-2 zoning. These areas actually would be allowed for the testing, the cultivation, and the manufacturing facilities. And then we do have some specific setbacks. So all of these other colors you might be wondering, like for down here, in this case, we do have 1,000-foot setback from a residence to a manufacturing facility, due to safety concerns, due to odors, due to things like that. So we chose 1,000 feet at the committee level. And so this would mean basically that this area you would not be able to have a manufacturing facility, but you could still have a testing facility, and you could still have a cultivation facility. This next border here, it's kind of the lighter blue. This basically is a 500-foot setback from residential. You can kind of see some residential in here, so that kind of gives you a little idea. So that actually means that you could have a testing facility, but you wouldn't be able to have the other two uses, either the cultivation or the manufacturing. And then this yellow is basically your 300-foot setback for your testing. So we'd have a 300-foot setback from residential for testing facilities, a 500-foot setback for cultivation facilities, and a 1,000-foot setback for the manufacturing, and that's sort of based on the level of the intensity of the uses, assuming that their cultivation facility will be a heavier use than a testing facility, which is basically a lab. And that also assumes that the manufacturing facility is going to have be heavier in as a use, have more traffic, have more negative impacts to residential for smell, particularly odors and things. And so that's why that's a further setback. So if we wanted to look in a little bit more at the dispensaries, there's a bunch of setbacks. The first one is 1,000 feet, and that's actually written into the state administrative rules. And so you can see here on the map where these are noted if you kind of look through the legend. So that's all of these things. So we've taken those out. Remember, we said it was allowable for a dispensary and a C1, a C2, or a C3 district, so long as you met setbacks from protected uses. The protected uses all deal predominantly with areas where you're going to find children in higher numbers. So schools is one, daycares, licensed daycares is another. Also, churches are in that group as well. And I can't remember all the others. I don't have my ordinance in front of me. Parks and Rec, yes.
Park and recreation areas, libraries.
Yes. So there's a number of protected areas too with setbacks, and they're all of varying distances. So if I pull up another map.
Stacy, I got a question.
Sure.
Okay, on the north, it looks like it's downtown. There's a little bit of blue. Where's that at exactly?
So there's just a little bit along Kemp, and then there's some to the north. And I'm going to pull up a better map here.
Yeah, where's Kemp Avenue on that map? If you could just...
Sure. I'm going to pull up one that's just for dispensaries here. So if we want to just look at dispensary areas. Well, hopefully it loads.
Ancillary business to appraisals. Oh, okay.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Now.
Well, the 1,000-foot setback isn't from houses for the dispensary. That's from schools. And so I think we have
But in downtown Watertown, we have a lot of apartments. This is what I'm just wondering.
Sure.
What
Okay.
part?
Stacy, I
fits
could answer this question
Sure.
if you want. So
Yes.
staff from the first planning district did the analysis
Here we
on
go.
this. And so the analysis was based upon residential zoning, commercial zoning. And so there may be an incidental apartment in one of those structures or on that property, but we didn't have the GIS information to determine that. So it's very possible that in this area, in the uptown area, downtown area, that there could be a couple houses that knocks everything out, or a couple apartments that would knock the residential out.
Because it's amazing how even in some of that heavier industrial area and stuff, there are houses and they're surrounded by commercial and stuff. So
This was based upon residential zoning. The commercial zoning was just based upon uses that we were confident about.
Yeah, and the mapping too is just the best available data that we had. So should someone come in, we would do a double check and verify as well. But this kind of looks at it comprehensively and says, well, where are the areas in town that we felt like as a committee it would be appropriate? And so we said the C1, the C2, and C3, and that's typically also where, you'd find your pharmacies and things of that nature. So it's a bit different than a pharmacy, but that's how we came up with this. So if you want to look at it more comprehensively, you can see that there's it looks to be some ample areas of where these would be directed along the 212 corridor. And there's also a little bit up here on Highway 20. And then there's some of the larger downtown area here.
When we applied the setbacks, the C2 is basically wiped out because most of our C2 is in close proximity to residential zoning. And again, if we were looking at dispensaries, at least under the model here, we're thinking 3 dispensaries located within a municipality. There's, as Stacy said, ample amount of locations for the market to drive where that would go.
Do we, as a city, do we control the number, or is that controlled like the alcohol licenses?
The statute does explicitly allow cities to set a number, doesn't provide how we may go about doing that.
And I understand that you guys had, there's a lot of committee discussions, but why do we care how many there are?
We had a big discussion just on that. And we talked about that on either let the market completely decide, which is one aspect of it. The other thing was to start with a number, and you could always reduce that and get rid of the number because we don't know what we're dealing with. I think was part of it too. I know we both had a lot of police conversation that was brought into the discussion. We were on both sides of this. We went back and forth on it.
So question now, are we talking, this is the medical marijuana or is this all marijuana?
This is just medical marijuana. Currently, you cannot have adult use recreation marijuana in the state. The medical marijuana, again, I think the market is going to be driven statewide. There's probably going to be less than 8,000 people that qualify from a card perspective. You're going to need to be in a physical location that has close proximity to doctors that can write prescriptions. In the end, I think the market will take care of it. I don't see 2 or 3 of these operations would probably be more than whatever happened just to fill that economic void. However, part of the thing that could also come out of this, we had this discussion, if we have 15 medical marijuana facilities, there could be an ask later if adult recreation comes back that I am already doing it, the medical, why can't I do it? And I know we addressed that a little bit in there, but that was part of the other reason is that do we want to have a plethora of recreational facilities? And Matt, maybe you could address that.
Yeah, to Todd's point, Commissioner Case, we kind of went across, there's a broad spectrum of opinions on that. You know, originally there was a thought, well, so back up a second. Statute allows us to set a number. There's no reason the number can't be 0. We don't believe, with the exception of dispensaries, because there's a second statute that says that cities essentially can't prohibit a dispensary. So the common consensus amongst some lawyers across the state is that we could probably have it be 1 is the least amount of dispensaries you could have, if you, in theory. So that's kind of was the starting point was let's start small, and the flip side is let the market figure it out. There's been some discussions with other states that have expressed that when you let the market sort it out, there tends to be there's a risk of people are trying to cut corners at all costs, cut costs, they're competing against each other dog eat dog. There's a risk that they don't pay sales tax. There's a higher risk that there's more of an incentive to sell it out the back door. And so there has been some, sounds like in other states, there's been some downsides to the let the market figure out mentality. Now, again, this is just a proposal, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for both this board and the council as well as the general public to comment on this, but that's kind of where just was the proposal that was brought forward.
Thank you, Matt.
There's
So, sorry.
Oh, I'm
One more
sorry.
question, Matt, then just along those lines, perhaps, when these licenses, these 3 are issued, are the neighbors, am I told that the dispensary is coming in next door to me? Is there any notification on this, or does it come in front of the board, or is it just city staff that gives those locations?
Set up as permitted uses.
Yeah, permitted special use. If you meet all of the criteria for the location and for the standards that's listed in the ordinance, then it would act as a permitted use.
The neighbors are not notified?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
The other thing I wanted to point out, we did have a lot of discussion at the committee level about the number. And so we did, as City Attorney Roby indicated, we did get some comments from some other communities and things that we have to rely on because this is all new in South Dakota. And from the law enforcement perspective as well. Having said that, we did a little bit of research, and don't quote me on this number because I can't remember off the top of my head, but we were looking at pharmacies and how many pharmacies per capita do we typically have, that type of thing. Knowing that, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Kays, how many patients in North Dakota have their medical card?
I believe the number was somewhere around 8,000.
8,000 is all. So we were kind of thinking based on the number of population or how do I say this, pharmacies per capita, we looked at that and then we also thought, well, and I think that number was like 1 per 4,300 within the state, but don't quote me on that because I'd have to get that research. So we were kind of thinking, to have a general framework of around 1 per 30,000, maybe not exactly, but that's kind of where that came from, is we did have a bit of a rationale. We didn't just completely arbitrarily pick that out. So it was based on comments and a bit on looking at population, what we would think would be somewhat reasonable.
What about signage?
We do have I feel refer to, and I'm sorry, I don't have my ordinance in front of me. I could probably pull it up. But there is a section in there about signage, and we do have some restrictions on the signage. Thank you. Thanks, Jason. That was very helpful.
So it's not going to be like out in Vegas with that great big neon?
That's what we would like to prohibit. Some of this comes from the state administrative rules in terms of no billboards and things like that. But then there's also just a little bit more because this is something where not everyone will be allowed to go in. It will be people of a certain age. It will be caregivers, and then it will also be those with their medical cards.
So do we have a limit on the number? Again, I guess I assume these are done in greenhouses. They're not done in fields then, right?
Correct. All inside.
So do we have a limited number of them?
No.
And we don't have a limited number of the labs that Stacy's referring to then either. Okay.
No, the thinking there was that specifically cultivation and manufacturing, I don't know about testing necessarily, but the thinking there is that the capital investment required on the front end is going to probably naturally limit the, how many of those in the market, in the general market for it will naturally limit that. Whereas the thinking on the dispensaries is it'd be less capital intensive to start a dispensary.
So they won't be able to they won't be able to truck in cannabis from Iowa or North Dakota from one of their manufacturing places to Watertown. It has to be in Watertown?
Oh, I'm not saying that.
No, they don't have to purchase from so a dispensary can purchase from a legal manufacturer. It doesn't have to be a legal manufacturer in Watertown.
Yeah, it's not a vertically integrated system.
Right.
Would you just kind of explain to him that, we have purview over the zoning
Sure.
aspects of it, but the ordinance is
Yes.
actually a very comprehensive ordinance that
Yes.
addresses that?
Sure. So what we've tried to do here is we have relied on the state's draft rules as one piece of this. And so we wanted to make sure what we had was related to the time, place, and manner, because that is the authority that's basically been specifically given to the cities. And Matt can describe that more if he would like. However, we were looking at things that would be a balance. This is all designed to balance the interests of those with medical cards, those wanting to or will have medical cards, those folks that want to start businesses, but balance that with the community interests and needs. And so while not prohibiting that, the use of it, and then also the business aspect of it from the dispensaries to the testing facilities, cultivation and manufacturing, we have allowed for those places in general. And that's the maps here in front of you. But then also looking at it from a community protection standpoint, that we have similarly, we have some setback distances from bars to public parks, things of that nature. So if you look at those protected uses, they're all, like I said before, areas where you may see a high concentration of children. Also putting out there too that this is different from a regular pharmacy because we do have some restrictions at the federal level. So
Yeah, I guess the point I was trying to make was that this specific ordinance will not be coming before the planning commission. The only thing that's coming before the planning commission will be the amendments to Title 21 that says that this types of uses are going to be allowed in this particular zone. The information in the setbacks in here are going to be part of a licensing type of an ordinance that references. The only thing that we will be acting on is whether or not a dispensary can be in a C1, C2, or C3. Is that correct? I mean, that's the action that we'll be making a recommendation. We won't be making a recommendation on this, on any of these other pieces, correct?
I'm going to defer to City Attorney Roby on that.
Because
That's a good question, because this, I mean, this is, there are multiple pieces of this that are time, place, and manner related. And, but, you know, and similar to the alcoholic beverage ordinance that's in Title II, there's a setback requirement in that ordinance that, yeah, you're right. I mean, technically, yes, it's not Title 21, this would be in Title 25. But I expect that we'll bring it forward as at least as part of to keep it part of the discussion. I expect that the council will want to know that the Plan Commission supports this as well, even though maybe, yeah, legally you'll just be voting on the Title 21 changes.
that's all I was just wanting to get across. That we won't be technically voting on this, only on the what's in the districts, but we need to be looking at from a planning commission if we think that those suggested setbacks are appropriate. I do want to echo, on my career side, I'm doing this in 50 other entities, and we're dealing with the same situation, and the window is closing. We have to have everything locked down by the 14th of September at the last date. And so we are, I think what will end up happening is we get this down, depending on what happens with the Supreme Court down the road, but I think this will be revisited at a later date as we get a better handle, that it's just something to get our fingers in the dike.
Yeah, we want to get something on the books. There's going to be a special session, a special legislative session expected to be in November. And there's talk of some legislation related to this. There's talk of legislation coming forward, whether or not Amendment A is struck down or upheld. I believe there's going to be some discussion of legalizing adult use marijuana at this next legislative session. There's an open question about whether municipalities can get into the business if they so chose, similar to there's a local option for alcoholic beverage sales. That's why Brookings, for example, is the only liquor sales in town. So there's a lot of questions up in the air right now. It's just a matter of getting something in place, and then we'll probably have to come back and tweak this once or twice in the future, I would guess. One other thing too, there's, as far as the balance goes, there is some, one thing we're trying to do here is provide a resource for folks looking at what are the rules related to medical marijuana in Watertown. And so there's the state administrative rules are 108 pages long. The statute is plenty long. So the idea here is there's some things in here that are duplicative of the state. Only basically for convenience purposes. So somebody that's interested in this can look and say, oh, what are the basic rules around some of these things? So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wanted to have an ordinance that, for all intents and purposes, was relatively easy for the general public to understand, and also those that are looking to start businesses or have medical cards. So kind of one-stop shopping, if you will, when looking at this. So that was kind of the intent, and to, like Matt said, have duplicate things in that mirror the state as well.
I have a for instance question. Now, let's say somebody moves here from California with a medical marijuana card from California. Do they have to get a different card for South Dakota, or can they use the California one?
I think it's if it's legal.
Yeah, I believe that if you've been issued a card by another state, that you're able to purchase from a South Dakota dispensary.
I do want to point out that as being a part of the task force, I want to thank Stacy and Matt for all their hard work. They did a really, really good job keeping all the stray cats in line.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, and not to take us down a rabbit hole off that note, but I am going to take us down a rabbit hole, Todd. I'm just curious, okay, so the curve on First Avenue where, Hobby Lobby is, and we have that proposed hockey rink, and then the residential up there, residential homes. Right now we have purple and red there. So if someone were to come tomorrow and say, I want to put one there,
Again, what this is based upon current land use at the time when we did the analysis. If somebody was to pull an ice skating rink or a residential development permit for those areas, they would theoretically automatically have a buffer put around them. But until that happens,
that's what I'm saying.
Then it's a first come, first serve who's got dibs.
That's what I was just
okay. Yeah.
So if they got marijuana and somebody wants to bring in a really cool housing development, they couldn't do it. They'd have to be farther away.
No, the housing development could happen, the hockey rink could happen. They would just be an allowable use. They'd be non-conforming to the ordinance, but they would have the ability to continue on just like any other non-conforming use would happen.
Yes.
No different than, I'm raising 1,000 cows out in the county. You decide to move across the road from me. I want to go and I want to expand my cows in Cottington County. I was there first. I have the right to expand my operation, and you have to just go along with the ride. But you're going in with eyes wide open what kind of neighborhood you're moving into.
Right. There is a section in here that does address just that in terms of if, basically if a dispensary goes in, for instance, and there aren't any of the protected uses around, then a protected use comes, the dispensary still can stay there, that type of use. Or a protected use could choose to locate closer to that dispensary. So.
This is Ford. The audio is a little shaky, and I didn't understand the answer to the question about the California medical marijuana license versus do you need to get one in South Dakota? What was the answer to that?
The answer was yes.
You would need to get a South Dakota license.
No, if you got a valid license, you're good to go from another state.
A valid license from another state can be used in
Yep.
South Dakota. Thank you, Liam.
Stacy, could you kind of give us the timeline of what's going to happen here in the next month?
Sure, absolutely. So we wanted to bring this forth to you all as a draft so you could see it, have an opportunity to ask questions, because it will be going to first reading of ordinance at the city council level August 16th. And then it will be potentially then coming to you all as the Plan Commission, as well as a joint meeting for the joint ordinance on August 19th. And then it will go to second reading, the timetable that we've laid out anyhow, September 7th, which does then give us the opportunity to publish it, and then it would potentially be in effect by October 1st.
So we're looking at action on August 19th from the board. That's the proposal?
Correct. Yes, along with a joint meeting as well, which I'm not sure, Commissioner Kays, if you could provide just a quick update on the joint jurisdiction area.
The joint jurisdiction ordinance, as has been drafted by Mr. Zoning Officer Muller, basically is going to restrict dispensaries cultivation, manufacturing, and testing facilities in the joint jurisdiction area. The county's regulations as being proposed is that cultivation, manufacturing, and testing will not be allowed in the rural unincorporated areas of the county. Only one dispensary would be allowed in the county in the area outside of the joint jurisdiction area. And that's going to be, again, more of a holding ordinance for the county until they can have some serious time to vet where those manufacturing and cultivation facilities, because obviously you maybe would see cultivation facilities in the ag area, but the county's not ready for that yet.
Is that planned to be a special meeting, Todd?
I think they're going to be. I think they're coming to the city
Yes.
for that meeting.
Yes, we would have a portion of our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 16th, inviting the County Plan Commission members, and we'd have a portion of that at that time.
Hey Todd, where would that area be at? Like something farther east on 212? In the zoned commercial or industrial
We don't have,
area?
there's not a lot of commercial
Yeah.
or industrial zone property in the county. There is some commercially zoned property outside the joint jurisdiction area on the south side of 212 out by the Rooster. And there are a couple other spots within the county. If somebody wants to find them, they can look for them and they can decide whether or not they can purchase them. But
So this is Ford again. So I'm curious, Stacy, is this all informative, or are you looking for some direct feedback from us? What exactly do you want from us?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I think the idea tonight was simply to get everyone a copy of the draft so you can all review it. If you have any immediate questions or comments, absolutely. But just for general discussion tonight is all.
And I think what I would like to have as a goal is, our agenda deadline for the council meeting is on Wednesday the 11th. And so I think by that time, we'll have kind of our formal proposal. There'll be, again, some little bit of cleanup here and there in this. And I would expect that we would just circulate that to the Plan Commission at the same time. And so if there's any comments specifically on that draft prior, it'd be helpful if they came before that first council meeting. But there's still some wiggle room there to make some small changes, between meetings and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, by all means, if there's comments right now, or if you take it home and you're reading it in bed at night tonight, and you have comments.
Yeah.
If anybody does have additional comments after tonight, send them to Stacy and you, Matt.
Yeah,
Is that
send
right?
it to both of us. That'd be great.
Yeah, that'd be terrific. And, just reading it from a user standpoint, is this clear? Does this make sense? What about the direction of the time, place, and manner? Try to really hone in on that would be my advice to you. The zoning component of that, does it make sense? Do these setbacks make sense? That type of thing, how this is directed, and does it strike a balance between allowing the uses and then also having some community protections in place? So that's what I would recommend on that.
Is there any way you could email each of us that colored map?
Yes, I'd be happy to email those out. We did. I wanted to thank Commissioner Kays and First District for those maps. Did a great job with a very limited amount of time. So absolutely, we can email this out to everyone, and then we'd be seeking your comments sooner rather than later on that. So. With that, I was going to ask you privately, Diana, or any members, if you would like to proofread, we would be happy to take that assistance. So we wrote this very quickly. So, so if anyone's interested, if we have any takers, feel free to put those comments in as well.
Well, I've already identified a few typos as we've sat here, so
Yes.
give me a few days and then proofread. So we don't,
Yeah.
don't want to
Yeah.
don't want to duplicate work, but yeah, I
Yeah.
expect that we'll circulate this to the group by the 11th, the final draft that we'll be putting on the council agenda, as well as I don't know how quickly we can circulate the map, but that'll come out. soon.
Yeah.
Sooner at the same time as
Yeah,
that.
I can even send it out today or,
Yeah.
or tomorrow. So, yeah, and I definitely think there was probably some fat finger typing, and that would be me. So,
Let's face it, this is the time you want to get
absolutely.
really button it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So anything like that, just let us know, and we're.
And Stacy and the rest of the planning commission, I mean, once you read this and you look at the maps and you see the setbacks, if something is really causing you some significant heartburn on a setback, you say, well, what would it look like if, you know, if there's enough time, we could do some additional analysis to show, well, this is what a 750 setback looks back versus a, you know, I mean, but I mean, we need about a day turnaround, and so we can't be doing that 2 days before the meeting. So, I mean, and I'll just let Stacy kind of, you know, direct that, but I have staff that would be responsive to that if as long as we had enough heads.
What I like about is that the map she's going to give, I'm assuming it's going to be like the zoning map that the city has, where you can bring it in and you can measure too.
PDF. This is just a PDF. We don't have this information hosted on the website that you can do this. This is just we could add that, but because it's in flux, we decided that it probably wasn't a good thing to put out on the web.
No, what I was
If you
just
had a
thinking
specific
is
area
if
that you
could
did have in question, though,
enhance
you
it and
could.
stuff.
I'm sorry, Blake?
I'll just say, if there's a specific area in question that you got, Bonnie, you could pull up the GIS and compare that distance there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just not going to have the overlay.
One of the things I did want to point out that Assistant Chief helped me out, Scott Youngblood, pointed out to me, I believe Assistant Chief, is that, yep. Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure. I think, Bonnie, you had a question about downtown, and we do have a provision in this draft that would preclude dispensaries from being in a building where there's living units or apartments. So there is that provision. The idea behind that would be we have some distance separation or setbacks from residential. In downtown areas, we have the mixed use, it's tighter quarters, but we did want to provide a bit of protection as well for those residents within that same building.
And I should also point out that I know there's been a lot of discussion on the downtown park. The setback from Immaculate Conception encompasses that area of where that proposed park would be located. So I know there was some questions about whether or not that would be a protected area.
Thanks, Todd. It's good information. I appreciate all the conversation. It's good questions and good content.
Oh, you're
Anything
welcome.
else on this topic?
I just wanted to ask and see if Assistant Fire Chief Scott Youngblood or if the building official, and I don't know if you guys have met Jason Spurgeon yet, if they had anything else to add. They've really been looking at this and done a fantastic job reviewing these types of uses from a safety aspect. Okay, they have nothing to add at this time. But I wanted to acknowledge them as well. They've been, as well as all of the members on the committee.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I did make a note earlier during the discussion around the vacation that I wanted to bring up the sidewalk around 3rd Avenue. I know we had a lot of this conversation at the time. However, I did have a couple of questions. So what we're doing for a sidewalk reconstruction currently on 3rd Avenue to the west of Bramble Park in the residential area. And Stacy, I don't know if you'll know the answer, but is the city assessing the cost of that reconstruction effort back to those property owners?
I'm not sure. I don't know if Matt, if you know that, because I would have to verify that with the engineering department, but we certainly could get that information out.
Is that's down just to the east of the Cowboy there? That's 3rd Avenue, right? That new sidewalk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that is an assessment project, but I can't speak 100% to that.
I would assume that it is with the cost that goes along with that kind of effort, and that's how we've done some of these things in the past. Just generally, I have some consternation of the city doing a reconstruction project like that and assessing it back to the homeowners, having strict landscaping requirements for sidewalk installation and landscaping and boulevard requirements for other developers, and then not following suit on city-owned property. So we're not continuing the sidewalk to the east along Bramble Park to tie into the bike trail, nor have we installed sidewalk on Lions Park to tie into the sidewalks to the residents to the east. So I brought this up pretty much every year since I've been on the board, the last 10 years. I do think that the city needs to take that seriously and install sidewalks in that area.
We certainly can have more staff conversations about that and get back to you on that. And but definitely thank you for that note, and we will follow up.
And I would
Appreciate
chime
that.
in on that with Blake, also by the junior high, or the intermediate school now, and the Boys and Girls Club.
Yes.
No sidewalks.
Good point.
I mean, it's
Well, even
particularly
the
important where you've got
school-owned
areas
property
that
doesn't have
we're trying to
sidewalks.
encourage families and children. So Lions Park, as Liam noted, and I used to drive that road every day. It's got kids on it literally every day, and that park is highly utilized, which is great. That's what we want to see of our parks. But we also want to have some safe conveyance of pedestrian traffic, particularly our youth. So.
And I mentioned to the east, to the residential to the east, but there is a lot of traffic from the residents west, on the west side of the river, and then there's a ton of people crossing there, which is great. The bike trail's being used a lot, but there's just a lot of unsafe stuff that I see, and I'm a little bit attuned to that because I see it in my work all the time. But that would love to see sidewalks both on the east and west side.
And I know some of the
river.
feedback from the city in the past had been that, it would be done at the time that the bridge was replaced. But that bridge has been put off and put off. That doesn't necessarily need to wait for the sidewalk to gain benefit and pedestrian safety up to the point of the bridge on either side, to the east and the west. So I don't think waiting for the bridge is the right solution to the problem.
I agree.
Well, thank you. We'll certainly follow up and find out more about those particular projects that are in the works anymore, and relay these comments on. So thank you, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Stacy.
You're welcome.
Any other new business today? Any old business?
I don't have any.
Any reason for executive session?
No, I don't believe so.
All right, then I'll take a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Colleen.
All in favor of adjournment?
All right.
All opposed? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.